Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Eric Chenaux. Eric is, according to his Bandcamp, a purveyor of jazz, folk and pop-inflected avant-garde balladry, juxtaposing a warm, clear singing voice and fried, noised, semi-improvised guitar. Eric is one of those guitarists that you can hear for 2 seconds and you know that it's Eric. Especially when he's soloing. Sounds like that his instrument is made of wax and he's playing in a warm room. All the notes are bending and sliding and drooping. It's got this slippery warmth to it. This eyes half shut, woozy, humid feel. And Eric's voice is just such a gorgeous, soft counterpart to that. His new album, Say Laura, is out on Constellation. As he mentions in this interview, the songs keep getting longer. There are these lovely, sprawling jams where Eric is able to indulge in solos that just keep nestling further into the sentiment. It's also a more spacious, minimal record, like it's built from the same amount of implements just sprinkled over a larger stretch of time. And I loved speaking to Eric. There are some wicked anecdotes in here, some excellent records too. I really enjoyed listening to all 3. I think you're going to enjoy it. So you can support the podcast at ko-fi, ko-fi.com/crucial listening. And head over to attentionmagazine.co.uk/crucial listening for a whole bunch of back episodes and links associated with all the episodes, including this one. Thank you for your support. As always, it means a lot. Please enjoy this conversation with Eric Chenaux on Crucial Listening. Hello, Eric. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
So we're going to talk about your 3 important albums. Before we get there, I want to talk about your new album, Say Laura, which will have just come out, I think, by the time this comes out. So firstly, I'm wondering if you could tell me about the very beginnings of making this record. I mean, was there like a notion, a concept, a melody, or something that kind of sparked the process for this album? What did the start of this one look like?
Well, there are 2 ways to answer that question. Well, there are many ways, I imagine. One is that I just started writing, and then I decided that at some point that I usually write thinking that these songs will be at some point a record. But to take your question a little bit more seriously, I would say that there was one thing I wanted to investigate more than anything else, which was the relationship between the instrumental passages and the song, the vocal melody. I was thinking about Thelonious Monk a lot, and how when he solos, he really just continues to play the melody. He does not really go completely out, in quotation marks. The melody is always there. He's deconstructing it, ornamenting it, leaving stuff out. But for the most of his recorded output, you really just hear the melody being transfigured and modulated and played with being the most interesting to me. And so I wanted to try to figure out some ways that I could investigate that. And one of the ways that I ended up doing that was doing a scratch vocal especially in the first and last songs of the record, where you have basically those two songs are split in two. The first half of each being the entire form sung with the lyrics and the vocal melody, and then the entire form again instrumentally. And I sang the song twice, again for the second part of those songs, and played over in my headphones. I could hear the scratch vocal, which was then obviously removed for the listening public. And I can really hear it. I can really hear a difference. The time of the song moves forward in a similar way to when the human voice is singing. And in some ways it keeps my attention in between the playfulness of the guitar and the form of the song. And I really enjoy listening to that. I think it worked. It's something that I probably will continue to try and do. And now, when I'm playing this music live, because the recording process for me involves a lot of rehearsing, not so much to get it tight, but in fact, quite the opposite, to get it loose. To be able to improvise freely and within the form of a song, for me, takes quite a lot of time. I need to digest the time and space of the song. And that takes time for me. And so, yeah, I would say that with this record, that's probably one thing that changed as opposed to other records that I've made, where when I start playing, I kind of just go and perhaps lose a little bit of where I am in the song. And I like that sound too. But on this record, I decided to take a different approach, or a different conceptual approach to the relationship between the guitar improvisations and the vocal melody.
What's interesting when you say that is, it sounds like that. So as you say, you were less getting lost within the song, which I tend to associate that kind of experience with songs of longer duration. I haven't done like a direct comparison between, like, say, this record and some of your previous ones that I have an affinity with, but it feels like these songs are like longer on average than, say, in a lot of your previous
they just keep getting longer and longer. If I weren't constrained by the LP format, I have no idea how long these songs would end up being. I have no idea why any song that I like ever stops.
Yeah, right.
All music is too short for me. If you want to stop listening, you just turn it off. I'm not a huge, we're going to get into this with a couple of the things I want to listen to. But because there are a couple in there that betray that notion a little bit. But I like getting lost in the middle of the songs. As a listener, I'm talking about, and maybe when I'm playing too. The beginnings and the endings to me are kind of like brute necessities.
Yes.
Yeah,
totally. I'm with you. Another thing actually that I noted from, I think it was an interview that you did around Slowly Paradise, was that you mentioned the movement of your music formed the basis of like your main critique of your past work, and that it didn't move like you wanted it to. Sounds like the way that you've approached this new record has had a discernible effect on how the record moves through time, but is your music now starting to move as you want it to?
As I want it to. It's a bit. I'm not really sure. It gets closer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really slow with any idea of progress or reaching towards something. I like to take very small steps with each record. I have ideas in my mind of where it might go, and these obviously may change as my life changes. But yeah, I would say so. I think that you might be right. I think that that the movement that we're talking about definitely comes from the idea of soloing over my singing voice, so that I can hear the cadences of the voice tell me that new chords are coming, that new harmonies are coming, and I can kind of cadence along with them with the guitar, and those cadences are most definitely forward moving. I also think that it might be a little bit to do with the rhythms of these songs, which are a little bit more forward in motion as well.
Yes. So you use the Boss drum machine, right, as a kind of basis. Yeah.
Yeah, that opened everything up, because before I was using a sequencer that was stuck in, quarter note, like straight time. Mm-hmm. And with the drum machine, some of the beats, like the beat for There They Were, the fourth track on the record, the beat is 4.5 minutes long before it repeats.
Oh, wow.
And that, it's impossible to know when I'm playing it live. I have no idea where I am in that beat, but I can kind of get a sense of the pulse and the general downbeat. And the time signature of that one is 1-1 as opposed to 4-4, or it's really just, and it's an idea that I was very much influenced by Martin Carthy when he was talking about traditional music, and that the time signature of all traditional music is 1-1, which is why he has such a gorgeous fat downbeat. And we're going to get to that too with some of the things we're going to listen to.
One final question on Say Laura is, it also feels like a record that's more spacious than previous ones. Certainly your voice, I think, occupies a greater degree of space within the music, and I wonder whether or not that necessitated you approaching your vocals differently, or made you think about what melodies might work best in this context.
Well, we're going to get into that with the Betty Carter record.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's more space. That was a very conscious decision, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. I did a lot less guitar overdubbing on this one. I really wanted it to be a kind of strange trio, hypothetical trio between the voice, the rhythm, which is also harmonic, because the rhythm is spewing out the chords, and try and be a little bit more concise with what the guitar was going to be doing. On Slowly Paradise, for the most part, there are two guitars going at once on almost every song. And on the last song of that record, Wild Moon, I didn't do that. And that song really was the bridge between kind of how I was thinking about recording at that time and where I wanted to go with thinking about Say Laura. And there was something a kind of only what is needed, in quotation marks, about Wild Moon that had that song stick in my head a lot more than the others, and made it it seemed conceptually clear to me. It seemed really clear. And I wanted to bring that clarity to a whole batch of songs on this record, which, for the most part I did. There's one song that has a whack of different stuff going on, but I think it's a little bit more, a little less soundscapey, perhaps. Yeah, I would agree with you there.
So let's go to your important records, Eric. And one question I ask at this point is how you thought about the word important in order to pick these 3 records. So was there a way that you interpreted importance to come up with the list that you did?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't give it much thought. As opposed, I know that I basically thought about 3 records that would be interesting to talk about. Not necessarily. I mean, there are so many records, obviously, that any person has in their life that mean a lot to them and that become very rich friendships that we live with, and that change along with us, that we carry with us along with in our lives, and I decided to try to think about 3 records that would be interesting to talk about in different ways. Often I cite a lot of more obscure jazz records and a lot of contemporary experimental contemporary composed music, because those are records I can really think about as records. And this time for this podcast, I wanted to try to talk about 3 different kinds of records for various reasons, and we'll get into those, I imagine.
Cool. So which one do you want to go with first?
Let's start with Inside Betty Carter by Betty Carter.
Cool. So could you give me a little introduction as to why this one is important to you?
She has the single most mind-blowing human voice I've ever heard. She's my favorite singer of all time. She stops my heart and mind every single time I listen to her, and I listen to her. There are rarely days where I don't listen to something by Betty Carter, by Betty May Carter. She was a jazz singer in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And she was nicknamed Betty Bebop by Charlie Parker. And anyone who's ever heard her scat can know why. Her ability to improvise without words was mind blowing. But for me, the stuff that I really love is just when she sings ballads, talking about cadences, talking about the voice, like you were a few minutes ago. There is so much from her voice that I have just ripped off and stolen. So many cadences, so many ways that phrases fall. And this record was the first record I heard by her, and it is my favorite, though it is an endless catalog of delights, her repertoire. But this one's got a lot of ballads on it, and it's a great band, and it's just beautiful. I would say that I've been marked and scored by the most by singers. It's my favorite instrument, that's for sure. And all of my music comes from singing. The guitar is, in a way, I hum it internally as I'm playing. And a lot of the ways I've developed bending strings and using the wah-wah is all very kind of vocal influenced. And Betty Carter's mouth and the way that she uses her mouth as this kind of cavern. She opens her mouth really if you go and watch a video of her singing, I mean, you can see how it's basically a wah-wah, her mouth. It's insane how she's able to kind of project so many fine frequencies coming out of her mouth, singing these gorgeous tunes she's got. She wrote some beautiful tunes as well. But yeah, this record is just is insane. Totally insane to me.
Do you remember how you first came into her music?
I think I might remember the first time I heard it. It was probably at a music space where we used to perform quite a bit in Toronto. Me and a whack of folks in Toronto, and my friend and musical comrade Ryan Driver put it on the stereo as we were setting up. Or I don't even know if I was playing that night, but we were setting up the PA. I don't remember. And just her voice, I was just like, holy shit! This is, here we go. It's kind of like, it was a bit like seeing somebody across the room and knowing that you're going to fall hard for this person, and you're maybe even a little terrified because your life's going to change.
Right.
That sounds a little over the top, but anyways, it floored me instantly, and it was this record that I first heard.
And how long ago was that?
Probably about 1992. No, 2002. 2002.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So coming up on 20 years of having Betty Carter in your life. So how's your relationship with their music changed after that point, that initial discovery? There are ways that, are there ways in which you've noticed your relationship or appreciation of the music develop?
I would say that actually, if I were to play one of her songs right now, I would say nothing has changed. It's just it's unknowable to me completely. The playfulness mixed with the beauty, mixed with this kind of lighthearted heartbreak that I hear in her cadences, is something that I can't hold. I can't hold it and know it. So I would say this about any of the records we're going to play, and many more, thousands of records, where that initial hallucination that you experience, that you encounter when you hear something that is so strange and beautiful to you, is something that continues. And those records that stick with you they stick with you not because you know them.
Yes.
And in that way, they really are like friendships. One of the beautiful things about friendships is that those friends that just stick to you like glue, there's something about them you don't know. There's something about your friend that you never know, that you don't want to change. And that unknowability perhaps becomes comforting, more or less, hopefully. But that the psychedelia of that experience hopefully remains. And with Betty Carter, that is most certainly the case.
Are there any particular ballads or any particular tracks generally on this record that, when you think back to listen to it now, protrude for you as favourites or just really notable in your mind?
From this record?
Yeah.
Well, I decided beforehand that I would like to hear, I think it's the third track, and it's called Beware My Heart. And I chose it because the opening of her voice on this record is completely insane to me. And she sings the word "beware my heart" in a way that is absolutely psychedelic to me.
You mentioned riffing on some of the cadences that Betty Carter uses within her music. I mean, on Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most, the way she starts that song.
That would have been my second choice. It's my favorite song on the record, and potentially my favorite vocal performance of all time.
Wow. I mean, can you unpack that for me? Is there anything specific that makes it that way?
Well, the song is completely nuts. I mean, the form that her arrangement is completely nuts. The song itself is completely. The melodies are crazy. The lyrics are stunning. I mean, there's a lyric on there. There's many. Sulphur and molasses. Oh, no, doctors once prescribed a tonic. Sulphur and molasses was the dose. But it didn't help a bit. Spring can really hang you up the most. And this is a jazz ballad. Right. And that's just, and the way she sings, it's really hard to separate it from her performance. But I mean, the song is just out there. I mean, it's so gorgeous. And I don't know what else to say about it. It's crazy. I have put that. I made a conscious decision to stop putting it on playlists because it was on every single playlist that I made for either friends or for podcasts or for 10 years. It was on every single, and I'm like, okay, I think I have to I think I have to bar this song from that. I mean, at some point, there's probably one or two people that have listened to most of those playlists, and they don't need to hear it in every single context. And it opens up space for other things. So
nice.
But yeah, that song is that's a desert island song for me, for sure.
Wicked. Yeah, that's really the one that stuck out. And like I say, the very opening when she goes like spring, like that is that's just nuts. Yeah, that's just completely nuts. And in fact, hearing that song I wrote a song directly after that was probably the first song that could be considered my take on a jazz standard, which is kind of how I write all my songs now, which I write them very kind of like a jazz lead sheet, the melody and the chords, so that they could be played very by a lounge band or something. And that's kind of the form in which I write. And that one, after hearing that song, within a couple of days, I had written a song called "I See Warm Weather Rolling In," that is very much inspired by how I felt about that song. Well, Eric, let's go to your second important album now. Which one do you want to go for?
Let's go with something somewhat completely different, and let's go to The Glass Trunk by Richard Dawson.
Yeah.
Yeah. A record that many of your listeners know, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about something maybe a little less obscure.
And why is it one that's important to you?
Well, I think it's a masterpiece, but plain and simple, full stop. I love everything that Richard has done. I've seen him live many times in various guises, solo and with his trio. But this record is straight up a masterpiece for a million reasons. One being form. I just think he nailed something with the a cappella tunes and the guitar and electric harp instrumentals that are at once kind of so different, and one relieves the other. So you're kind of constantly swaying between these two worlds, and yet those two worlds have a kind of no man's land between them.
Yes.
That starts to form, and I just think it's a marvel of a record, and his voice is nuts as well. His lyrics are at once hilarious and heartbreaking. And on this record, although he doesn't really sound like Robert Wyatt, there's something to me that he's one of the first people I've heard that I could actually say reminds me of him. And it's because he allows his Englishness to come out.
Yeah.
And you don't hear that. It's weird how, you listen to Nick Cave and he could be from Tennessee. I love Nick Cave.
Yeah.
But, Robert Wyatt was kind of, there's Ivor Cutler, obviously. There's lots of people who sound, the Beatles don't sound English to me. Mick Jagger, most deaf, does not sound English to me. And I love Mick Jagger with all of my heart. But there's something about hearing Robert Wyatt sing something like, I don't know, just choose any, like what is the song called? Sleep from Sleep? Or Heaps of Sheep from the record Sleep. And it's that English tenor that comes out it's just bloody heartbreaking to me. And it also speaks to the relationship that he may have with his own voice, that he really found that the way to use his voice that no one could do. I think everybody has potentially or hypothetically an amazing singing voice. And you just have to find what it is your voice wants to do and listen to it. And I feel like, that Robert Wyatt had obviously done that work. You hear this kind of natural sound world of a voice a lot in a lot of traditional musics. A voice I'm thinking about a lot right now, as she passed last week, is Norma Waterson. And her, along with a lot of her friends from that time, also had that. Anne Briggs had that. Martin Carthy certainly has that. Norma's daughter Eliza has that. Mike Waterson has, all of them, Lau Waterson, all the Watersons have that. But in pop music, or for better or for worse, in pop music, there seems to be this thing where this striving for a kind of non-geographic placement of the human voice, or internationalism, I would call it, kind of the international sound, which is just, I guess, American for all of the worst reasons.
Yeah.
But with Richard, that's just shattered. It's like, he's from Newcastle, I believe.
Yes.
And that's where his voice comes from. It comes from there. And it makes it more specific. It creates ornaments and timbres that no other voice will have. And he reminds me a lot of Mike Waterson, who has that as well. And in fact, on this record, I think he sings a English folk tune that he may have learned from Mike Waterson.
Oh, right.
And yeah, what was that? What's that song called? The Brisk Lad, I think. The Brisk Lad, which is something that Mike Waterson sang, and Richard does a sinisterly beautiful version of on that record.
Yeah, they're good adjectives for Richard. I also find, as someone who encounters a lot of music that's by British people, I guess conveying British experience, there's something very relaxed and matter of fact about Richard's lyrics that feel very reflective of a British day out in a completely non-romantic way. But
Yeah,
a trip to the museum and an ice cream on the way home.
that's the song I was gonna pick.
Oh, really?
That
How
song
come?
that's devastating song. I mean, because he the other reason I wanted to talk about this is because, I mean, you hear these songs and they sound kind of like an a cappella English folk tune. Mm-hmm. I mean, even though some of the ways some of it's some pretty strange vocal places he goes stray a little bit from that, but it's almost like he's digested that music and then created an entire new hypothetical world where he shares his love for that music and at the same time composes into it in a way that is so interesting. And yeah, they're matter of fact. I mean, there's a lot of playful kind of, and also self-referential, not self as in Richard himself, but within the song, lyrics that he does write. And then he just sings them out. It's impossible to really separate the lyrics from the way in which he performs them, because so much of it comes from just how open he is with the melody and open with the lyrics, to the point where it doesn't sound to me like he wrote them at all. He's singing them with the joy of somebody who found them.
Yeah.
You know, there's this kind of, and that's the key to so much beautiful music. It's the key to the blues. You know, Robert Johnson wrote those lyrics, but you'd never know it. Skip James wrote his lyrics for the most part, I imagine. And they sound like something they stumbled upon and were in wonder of. And they sing them with that joy of stumbling across something beautiful and sharing it. And you really, really, you get that on the records and you get that live where you feel like that Richard is sharing something he loves with you instead of hoping you think he's great or hoping that you like what he's composed. It's, it sounds like somebody going, hey, look at this. And that creates a social space that is profound for, especially for a music that is composed, he's not necessarily an English folk singer, though he certainly can do that. Yeah, it's that record is, I know why, or I can fully understand why he decided that he would start playing with bands and stuff like that, and that those are amazing records and wonderful live shows. But I just have this huge soft spot for the form and the music of his solo performances.
Yeah, me too. One thing I guess I should mention, because it feels very connected to the point you just made about the fact that feels like he's sharing something, is the background of this record, by the sounds of it, is he was invited by Tyne-and-Wear archives and museums to pour through their collections and then write 30 minutes of music based on whatever he could find. It sounded like he, from what I've seen him write about that experience, that he really dove in and soaked up all of those stories that he picked up. I guess that is what he's doing, is bringing these stories to people and saying, wow, this is an incredible anecdote and I'm going to sing it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember reading that too. I'd forgotten it, so thanks for reminding me. But I mean, we could say the same thing about anything from his newest record, the last Richard Dawson record, the 2021, I think it's called. I think it shares that same wonder of sharing. no matter what he's writing about. I mean, that's the great thing, is that a great singer can sing anything.
Right, yeah.
You know, they can sing anything because the joy of the relationship between them and their voice is one of pure joy. And not so much steeped in representation or things revolving around one's narcissism, but something much more social than that. And obviously, I mean, you'd have to be dead to not hear that in Richard's performances.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to pick up on this one is, it's funny when you search both your names together, you get a lot of people drawing a parallel between you both as artists, which I find curious and sort of set my mind going as to like what they were picking up on. I mean, I suppose maybe like an idiosyncratic, crooked, I don't know if that's the right word, approach to playing the guitar. I mean, I've seen in your another interview you did that you talk about the emphasis on unamplified electric guitar. I mean, that feels like a prominent aspect of Richard's work as well, right? I mean, his guitar playing as well, a source of connection with his music for you?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that out. I seem to be, it's Sunday here. It's Sunday there. And so seem to be thinking about the human voice a lot today. But I mean, the guitar playing it's virtuosically nuts. I mean, and it sounds like Beefheart. It really, it's easy to say, oh, it sounds like Beefheart when you hear a bit of angularity and specificity, because Beefheart's guitar parts were written out. But what it shares with Beefheart, or even I might say something like the Shags, is the insane counterpoint that is happening, the detail in the way that the melodic lines flow, that is pretty rare for a guitar player. I mean, he's an insane guitar player, and he plays wildly, unrestrained. And that's where I hear the relationship. I hear the kind of glue that puts the guitar and harp, the harp being played by Rodri Davies, also an insanely beautiful musician. And with his vocal performances, there's this just kind of unapologetically, there's a boom to it. And I don't mean a boom necessarily in terms of volume, though. He's not the quietest singer in the world, and he's certainly not the quietest guitar player in the world. But I mean a boom a little bit more psychedelically than that. Something that it seems to just explode from the earth. Mm-hmm. And it's gnarly and beautiful and strange, and ideas of harmonious and dissonant kind of wash away. A kind of binary idea about what is consonant and what is dissonant seem to disappear, and the whole thing just seems wild to me. Wild is the only word I can come up with today. The other reason I chose the Richard Dawson is because when we played together a few times, but the first time was in Copenhagen at Alice, or it wasn't called Alice at the time, it was called something else, but what was the jazz something in Copenhagen. And I walked into the room, and he was already there, and he was wearing a Sun Ra t-shirt. And one of the most beautiful things on this planet to me is the music of Sun Ra. And I also chose this record because usually I bring a Sun Ra record into these conversations. And so instead of doing that, I decided to talk to somebody who loves Sun Ra, and he most certainly does, as do I. I'm not sure you can really hear it in his music so specifically, but he digests his influences so idiosyncratically, and that's another thing that's beautiful about him.
Child on the head, and said to us, this exhibition is the first of its kind in the country. He led us through a hallway into a foisty room, boasting a dazzling array of animals, fishes, and birds.
Let's go to your final important record then, Eric. What have we got?
The next record is called Stain Ballads by the composer and musician based in Toronto named Martin Arnold. And what can I say about this record is I could have chosen anything by Martin. He makes, to me, the most beautiful music I've ever heard, and has influenced me in so many profound ways that I wouldn't be making the music I make if it weren't for Martin's music. And also Martin's a dear friend of mine, and we have a record label together and have played in numerous guises together in Toronto, and just being around him and hearing him talk about music is something that I think anyone who has would say is something that's pretty profound and beautiful. This record I chose because it's come out on a record label which is probably my favorite record label, Another Timbre, coming out of the UK, that puts out a lot of great contemporary composed music and some improvised music as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Martin's music I hear everything, and I really mean that. I hear everything that I love in Martin's music. I hear Ars Nova, like 14th century French polyphony. I hear the Wattersons. I hear Eliza Carthy. I hear Marvin Gaye. Everything that I love. Isaac Hayes. I hear beautiful lounge music. I hear psychedelic musics of all kinds, and it's melodious, it's harmonious, and it's strange. I remember playing Martin's first string quartet, Contact Vault, for a friend of mine. Must have been in the late 90s or around 2002. And he's like, this sounds like pop music to me. And my first thought was like, what pop music? I would love to hear any pop music that this sounds like. And I really didn't understand what he was talking about. I mean, if you listen to his music, to say that it sounds like pop music is kind of strange. But I think I might know what he means, in that it's beautiful. And pop music at its best is really beautiful too. It's I guess the melodic and harmonic material that does that. And it's full of detail. It swings and sways gracefully, and it's a music that luckily is starting to get heard more and more, thanks to Another Timbre, thanks to the Bezzini Quartet, and thanks to Apartment House out of London, who are all becoming champions of Martin's music.
You saw them perform Stain ballads right over here in London.
Yeah. How did you know that?
I think you wrote it somewhere.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Nothing too creepy.
Oh, I thought maybe
it's on
you were
public
there.
domain.
Well, maybe you were there. Yeah, I actually created a tour. This is how much I love Martin Arnold. I knew that this piece was going to be performed in. I think is it the Queen Elizabeth Hall?
Yeah, gorgeous. Yeah,
gorgeous hall, and that Apartment House was going to do it with the repertoire of that night was also something I wanted to hear, and I knew Martin was going to be there for that. And I live in France now. Martin lives in Toronto, and I thought, I'd love to be there and listen to that piece with Martin, and just be there for it. And so I actually created a tour of the UK so that I would be there, and I would pay my way to go hear the public premiere of Stain Ballad.
What are your memories of that experience, seeing that perform live?
It was amazing because there was a lot of people, a lot more people than are usually at that kind of thing, especially in Toronto. And the hall was great. And also I'd heard Martin's music so many times in Toronto, being with a whack of people that I knew very well. And to be here it just seemed kind of glorious to be able to hear it along with people who potentially didn't know his music as well, and along with other pieces composed by many of his peers, that composers that I know he loves, and to kind of hear it in that context. And the piece is crazy beautiful. There are things happening in it that I haven't quite heard formally in some of his other pieces, though one could say that he's kind of like Derek Bailey. You know, all of his pieces are of a piece. Or even somebody like Steve Lacy, where it's really hard to know, you know, there's not necessarily an early, late, mid, or late period Martin Arnold. They all share something. He's dedicated. His music comes out of a singular experiment, and he sticks to it. Not necessarily with tension. I mean, he doesn't hold on to something, but there are a lot of similarities between all of his musics, whether it's his composed music or even when he's playing fuzz guitar in the Ryan Driver Sextet, a beautiful psychedelic lounge jazz group in Toronto.
You mentioned that you wouldn't be making the music you're making if it wasn't for Martin. What did his music enable for you to allow you to make the music you're making?
Oh man, I don't know if we have time for this. I mean, so much of it is about, as an epiphany, it was hearing his first string quartet. And not unlike the Betty Carter epiphany, it was a relationship with the beautiful, and how the beautiful need not be maudlin, and it need not be separated from something strange or psychedelic. And that is something that potentially at that time I had been kind of fighting with, because I have a lot of my natural instincts lead me towards things that are very pretty. But I think I struggled with a kind of reverence for the beautiful, and also and how to fit in a kind of experimentation within that wasn't tacked on or at odds. And Martin's music is most certainly like the best tutorial on that. but it was also, listening to records with Martin and hearing him talk about them, hearing Martin talk about the Shags, hearing Martin talk about English traditional music. He's an amazing thinker too, and it's hard to separate. He's influenced a lot of people, not even necessarily with his music, but the way he listens. He's one of those people you want in the audience because someone's listening hard, and that at the end of the night he'll have things to say that will teach you something. I mean, not in the he's not trying to be a teacher. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But he shares he shares the way he listens with people in a beautiful way that I cannot in any way separate from how I hear his music. There's a lot about rhythm. There's a lot about melody. There's a lot about form in his music that I've learned about trying to critique certain narrative forms that leave less space for the listener. I think the idea of composing as a listener is something that, I was put into words for me by him. His interviews are amazing. His writing is great, whether he's writing about music or contemporary art, or he has a pretty psychedelic way of listening and seeing that has left a huge mark on me and a lot of others, a lot of my friends.
The thing that I'm getting from my early acquaintance with his music, I mean, I hadn't heard any of his stuff before you recommended it, Eric, so thanks for putting it in my direction too. But hearing you talk now and accompanying it with my experiences listening, there seems to be like he sort of seems to be bringing about a categorical impurity, which seems really healthy, right? So you talk about his reference to his music as pop music, and I guess that's a reference to facets within it which are deemed pop, even if the whole doesn't, tick every box. I've also seen him on a similar note talk about Stain ballads as dance music, and I wondered if you had any thoughts about that. Do you hear it as dance music as well, or do you see kind of where he's coming from when he says that?
Well, thanks to Martin, I hear everything as dance music. And I have spent many, many, many hours dancing in Karen Henderson's living room, dancing with people and Martin to dance music. And that's a blast. I mean, this is a guy that loves dance music, but he's talking, I can't really say exactly what he's talking about with that, but I think he's talking about a kind of movement and a kind of nomadicism of listening, and that listening in a way is as a form, dancing as a form of listening. And one that is quite psychedelic. It's one in a relationship to a body, less as a relationship to one's comprehension in the mind, a cerebral relationship to listening, which can happen at the same time too. But I hear what he's saying, and I've heard him dance, and I've seen him dance. Did I just say I heard him dance? I think that might be more true.
Yeah.
I think with his music we hear him dancing. Yeah, I'll stick with that actually. That's more true. I've seen him dance too, but it's less true right now.
One other thing I noticed is that you've reprised your label with Martin, Rat Drifting, like only at the end of last year. So how did that come back?
Someone asked, a friend of mine asked me to. Also, Bandcamp has created a form that I actually quite love, and there's a lot of forms of new digitization that I'm not the hugest fan of. But this one I really like, and it seemed easy. And the first idea was just to put up the old catalog so that people could hear it, kind of as an historical matter of a time period in Toronto, improvised and experimental and pop music. But then once you start doing something like that, you get the itch. And there was a couple recordings that we wanted to put up there. I made the decision to make it only digital because it would allow me to release anything.
Yes.
Even if it had no money behind it. And I think it will remain that way. I've flirted with the idea of making physical things, but I know my laziness well enough that I know that it would hinder a kind of openness to releasing things that may not sell very well, or might, I'd have to make decisions based on other criteria that I'm not interested in with rat drifting. And we just released 3 records that are just stunning records to me, and I am really happy to be doing it. It's a fun little thing to do.
I'll pop a link in the show notes so that people can check out the catalogue.
Sweet.
One final question for you, Eric, is you mentioned you listen to a lot of music, have a lot of important records in your life. Do you have a favorite or most frequent means of listening to music? Is there a place you like to do it most fondly? A situation? Yeah.
There are 2 that I think I can speak of. One is while traveling with headphones on a train. Not so much on the street. I find that a little harsh and a bit disconnected. If I'm walking through a park, perhaps, but on a train, just kind of glazing my eyes out the window, not really looking at anything and just listening to music, can be pretty great. At home, I have a hammock in my studio in the middle, hanging between 2 wooden pillars, and that's probably my favorite way to listen to music now. Lay in the hammock and put on a record. I do that. I love listening to music while cooking too, and I cook a lot. But that's a different kind of thing. Periphery listening to a degree. But yeah, laying down in the hammock and listening. I remember one very potent moment. I was in Berlin. This is about 14 years ago. And I was walking through, what's the name of the huge garden in the middle of Berlin? Garden, something, I forget. The major, that central garden. And I was listening to Robert Ashley's Private Parts. I think it took me the whole record to walk through that park. And I was walking towards a record store on the other side of Berlin, an experimental record store. And I had been listening, as I said, to Robert Ashley's Private Parts, a record that could have easily been on this list, but I've talked so much about it that I wanted to talk about something else. But it's, in the probably one of the top 3 records of my life. Walking through the garden, listening to Robert Ashley, having another kind of moment of kind of psychedelic listening, and it finishes kind of, about 15, 20 seconds before I reach the record store. I open the record store door, and I hear this voice say, "Where should I put my jacket?" And it's the exact same voice I'd just been listening to for 45 minutes, because it was Robert Ashley's voice, and he was there to give a talk about his graphic scores. And I had no idea.
Oh my God.
I mean, Robert Ashley lived in New York. We're in Berlin. I had no idea. I walk in. I still have the headphones and I actually look, and I'm like, what is this? I had no idea if it was coming from my headphones or not. The voice was a little bit more aged, but it was, he has such a particular speaking voice, quite famously. And I was so shocked that I just turned around and walked back home. Walked back to where I was staying.
Wow.
I didn't stay for the talk, which is insane, because I would have loved to have heard him talk about that. I had spent an hour walking through to get to the store to buy some records. I did neither, and I just turned around, put the private parts back on, and walked through the garden again. And, not really a regret, because actually the whole thing was kind of amazing, but it did show me a little bit about myself. It showed me how I deal with trauma in a way,
Right.
that I wasn't prepared for. But so kind of listening can happen in very strange places, and one can't always know when it's going to happen.
What a great place to end. Eric, thank you so much. I've loved talking about both your new record and also these three important ones. Thank you.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure for me too. Thanks a lot.
And to everyone listening, see you next time. Goodbye.